right, welcome back. It's not really welcoming back. It's welcome to another edition of the Local Hour here on the Chase Mums podcast, taping this on a Friday. We have Go Big Orange Friday. We have the Atlanta Sports Guys, and we had something else because I like things in threes. And because that's just a lot of fun to do, and those do really well, I wanted to add the Preds because I was thinking about where we could go and what we could also add to this program. And this made a lot of sense, and there are a lot of talented folks who cover and care about the Nashville Predators. And it's an area where I would like to learn more and understand more because guess what? The Atlanta Thrashers died a decade ago, more than a decade ago now. And, being in Tennessee for the last couple of years, I've started getting into the Preds and started watching more Preds. My father-in-law, Preds guy, my family is into it, and the fiance, we watch it, and she loves hockey. So I was like, all right, I'm going to dive more in. But the way it works for me is I need to talk about it. I need things to do to keep me engaged and to dive in more and learn more. And that's what this podcast is going to be, is getting to that point. Yes, Charlie.
I do have to ask,
Yeah.
why didn't you follow the Thrashers to Winnipeg? Are you not a big Winnipeg fan?
Not a big Winnipeg guy, and they're not even the Thrashers. They just went back to their old team. It's just the Winnipeg Jets. It was just like no mention of the Thrashers. The Thrashers are dead. It's just no, I can't. I was not going to do that. It wasn't the same. So no, I was kind of wandering in the desert, and it's weird. I don't think you guys have had this where you've had a team just move. You grew up going to Believe in Blue Land games, and it's just that was a thing, and then it's just gone. You're like, all right, this is just it. Like, I don't know what to do with my fandom and these old Atlanta Thrashers T-shirts. I don't really know where they go.
I'd argue I had the same feeling when I got to UT for my freshman year. I was like, what happened? There used to be a football team here, so.
Ooh. Well, the football team's back, Brian.
Yes, they are.
I don't know if you've heard, but the football team is back, and people forget.
Yeah, they forget.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're all UT guys. I finish up my master's here at UT this fall. Bryan, undergrad at UT. Charlie, undergrad at UT. But you did your master's at UT too, right?
I did, and I don't use it for a single day.
Hey, me neither. I also have a master's I don't use.
Oh, there we go. We're all getting our masters. This is a very smart program. We're very pro education on this show. Very pro education.
Your life because you don't know what to do. That's paying to delay your life decisions. Yeah,
that's what you do, man. Hey, you don't, and like you hope that you figure it out during that time period, and you stumble into the right thing. But I think that's okay. Charlie Burris, A to Z Sports. You've been on this program before for Tennessee football. You do a post-game reaction show with Eric Ainge during the season. But you're also a Preds guy. So what can the listeners what's your Preds story? Have you been a Pred guy from the beginning, or what? Did you get into hockey later? How did that work for you?
So I've born in Nashville, had family in Nashville, still have family in Nashville, but I've lived in Knoxville since I was 5. But because of that family in Nashville, grew up going to Predators games. I, in a very bandwagony way, did not get serious about it until the Cup run. Always followed it tangentially when they had the nice runs in the playoffs a few years leading up to the Cup run. I would watch those, like that great series with the Sharks and stuff like that. But beyond that, it didn't get to where I was like watching every game I possibly could until that Cup run. And I know that everybody, and I don't cover the team, it's purely fandom. I never have covered the team in like actual like writing about it, knowing, all of the gritty details of it. But I get extremely pissed off and I have opinions about everything. So there's, that much. That's basically the rundown on my Predators relationship.
There you go. Well, we have someone who covers and writes and is extremely well informed when it comes to the Preds, Bryan Bastin. Bryan, you write for on the Forecheck. Have you been a Preds guy from the beginning? Like, how has that been for you?
So I'm gonna say I moved to Tennessee for the first time, despite my whole family being from here, back in 2005 when I went to UT, and had a very, very passing interest in it for the time I was there. And then I moved here about 8 years ago, and like Charlie said, I got caught up with the cup run. I had watched a lot of hockey when I was a kid, and I lived in North Dakota for a little while. I watched the UND play up there, but never really got too far into it. Moved to Tampa in high school, and the only NHL game I had seen was a friend asked me if I wanted to go to one, not realizing what time of year it was, and it was one of the games in the Stanley Cup final for the Lightning and the Flames. So that was interesting, but I decided I wanted to follow along, kind of like everybody else did after the cup run. I was like, I feel bad. I'm going to try to be better informed and watch every game. I had a newborn, so it was a lot of nights where I was trying to put her to bed and watching or listening a game on a headset, something like that. And after about it, like you said, like wanting to talk about it and argue about it, I started doing that. And after about a year of kind of following them on my own, they reached out to me from on the Forecheck, and it's been kind of a whirlwind since then.
I wonder, because how do you take notes during games? Do you take notes because I take notes with baseball, with basketball, with football. Hockey is impossible to take notes.
It's very, very difficult.
How do you do that? Because the line changes and everything. I can't, it's just so difficult to do that. I don't know how hockey beat writers do that and write gamers immediately after. I feel like it's the most difficult sport to do that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff happening, but at any given time, they could be a lot of action, but nothing of consequence may happen. It's a reason why when I'm at games, I tweet quite a bit, because I'll go through my timeline after games and look at all the stuff that I tweeted. I also have voice memos when I'm at the game, just for things that I can't write down, because I can't write fast enough to keep up with what they're doing. So yeah, it takes some time, and usually a replay run through as I'm sitting there in the media section and just fast forwarding and finding spots.
I like it. Well, the Preds have been busy this offseason, and the biggest one was Filip Forsberg, who signed a long-term extension. Do you like the contract? Do you like that this is how it ultimately unfolded for Forsberg, Bryan?
Yeah, most definitely. The big worry was, throughout the season, they knew that the contract was going to be up. And a lot of people were saying that, if Forsberg doesn't look like he's going to sign, then he needed to be traded at the trade deadline so they could get something out of him, especially with the career year he had, scoring over 40 goals, just the second Predator to ever do it, with Matt Duchene, who also did it this season. But as we got closer and closer to free agency opening up, we were starting to hear reports that he was just kind of held up on a no trade clause and no movement clause, and the average value per year really wasn't as high as most people are expecting. That he was looking for something in the mid to upper 8 million area per year, and so they came out, and I think Poyle even came up and floated that number about a week before it happened, and so it would look like it was just a matter of whittling down, trade protection and things like that. Because I think Filip Forsberg has seen, the contracts that Roman Josi and Matt Duchene have received with, no trade clauses, but also saw, kind of what had happened with Ryan Ellis, who signed that 6-year deal, but didn't have any trade protection and got moved to Philly. And I don't think that he was too happy about that move. So actually, I think it was, a great value. I think he had a great year. This is a guy that's a cornerstone of your offense. He's doing the things that Roman Josi is good for on the defensive side. When you've got guys like Duchene and Forsberg both scoring 40 goals, it's a pretty good contract. It could have been a lot more expensive. The term is full 8 years, which is going to be rough as you get down the road. But I think that for the state of the team and where they're at, I think this was an excellent deal, and I'm glad that it finally got done.
Charlie, what about you?
I have always kind of been conflicted with Forsberg, because I've always felt like he's never truly lived up all the way to that his potential. I'd love to see him stay with the team, and he had an amazing season this season, but it just all of the hype around this. Is it bad that I kind of went, what if we did ship him off? What I mean? It just crossed my mind, because this season, it felt like we needed a freshening up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not, in no way am I gonna complain and say they shouldn't have re-signed Phil Forsberg. He's one of the best players in the league. That's for sure. But if they had traded him, or had it work another way, I would have been like, hey, we can get some fresh blood in here, because this is a whole entire other conversation, but I'm very much someone who was like, fire David Poyle, fire Hines, just redo this, just the whole thing. And they didn't, obviously. And so obviously I like it. Love Forsberg. Love everything that he's done for this franchise. Took us to a cup. Blah, blah, blah. We all know. Glad to see him. But I have to include that I had those thoughts. Just, I was kind of like, it's great, but what if we had a change of landscape?
That's more than fair, because if it be there's a handful of players that you'd be willing to kind of stick your neck out for and want to do everything you can to re-sign. And if they got they did Matt Duchene, they got Roman Josi, Matthias Ekholm's deal is pretty long. They still have Ryan Johansson's contract there with him being there, and that's kind of been they've tried to move him a couple times now, and so I can understand the hesitation, because you want to get new blood in there, but if you've got that same core, it can be difficult. And so I completely understand. And had they traded him, I think that could have been advantageous for the Predators. But once they weren't able to trade him at the trade deadline, then I think that they had no choice but to get him re-signed again, because, to let a player like that walk away for nothing, as opposed to trading him to getting some sort of return, was going to be a super bad look and probably accelerate that timeline of David Poyle being done with this team.
Well, is it a situation where you still bring him in? This happens in the NBA all the time. You don't lose the asset for nothing, but just the contract extension does not mean this player is part of your long-term plans. It just means that you can move this player and you have more time, and he's just under contract. Like, is this something where this signal that they are committed to Filip Forsberg for the next couple of years, or is this still a situation where if the right deal comes along, we're open? He's still not a cornerstone piece. Like, where do you think they landed on that?
I think, again, I think the main focus of Forsberg's camp and his agent JP Barrett was to get some of that trade protection. So he's got a full no movement clause, which kind of precludes him from being waived or sent to the AHL, which is not going to be an issue for him, right. I don't think. But he's got the last 2 or 3 years with that modified no trade clause. And so I think that they fully intend on having him available and being part of their plans for the next 4 to 5 years. And then before that, he's got the deal is very front loaded. And so it gives them options as they get towards the end of that. And it's for a modified no trade clause. It's just a 12-team or 10-team list for him that he submits I'm not going here. So I think that's available. And I think that gives them a little bit of options as you hit that year 4, year 5 mark. Because you still, he's going to last throughout the final years of Matt Duchene's and Roman Josi, Matthias Ekholm. And so they'll have that core there, and then they'll all start to kind of drop off one by one. So it gives them a little bit of flexibility. But I imagine that, in the next 4 to 5 years, he's absolutely a major part of their plans going forward.
See, it's this type of stuff that purely as a fan, in some sense, my eyes kind of glaze over when all of the details of the contracts, but when you explain it and the implications of it, because I feel like you asked me to do this and I was like, I'll give you my hot takes. Like I said, I was a fire Poyle, get start over type of guy, stuff like that, a little more 1,000-foot view. But I think about that, and like you're saying, everything you're saying, I'm going, oh, all right. Yeah, that all makes sense, so that's good. That's interesting. Sorry, just had to.
No, good to hear. I appreciate that. That it makes some sort of sense, because sometimes I don't know if it makes sense to anybody but me. So
I think I figured it would be a good balance between Bryan and Charlie, because it's two very different media personalities, I would say, in a good way. Well, do you think we'll end on this with Forsberg? He had a +12 ± this past year. He was in the negatives the previous 2 years. He was this past year was a contract year, and it was a big year for him. But my question at age 27, is this who he's going to be going forward? Is he going to be what we saw last year more often than not during the duration of this contract? Or is there a fear of, now that he's been locked up and now that he's got this contract, that I don't know, that he's someone to monitor as to what kind of player he's going to be next year and going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I would, again, I think there's a very real concern that, this was a year that he outproduced himself, much further than he had previously. I think his previous high in goals was 33, but that was in that year with Victor Arvidsson, and then, kind of hovered in the 20s both times. And the biggest issue for Forsberg hasn't really been his talent or his skill, it's his consistency. And that's been kind of a little bit of an issue where he has these dry spells. Obviously, we didn't see any goals from him in the playoffs, and kind of as they hit the stretch, and teams were locking down on him. But, it's something to be definitely concerned about. And also considering his injury history, last year seemed like it was a little light for him because he only missed 13 games from injury. But, that's been kind of a consistent issue. He's a strong, a mix of power and finesse, in a skater. And he's not afraid to kind of use that power to power through guys or get, into the boards with somebody. That's not his full game, but he's never kind of shied away from hits. And so, there's that injury history that you have to be concerned about as well. But I will say, after watching him the past couple of years in person and seeing, the development and talking to him a little bit, I think he's made a lot of strides under John Hines as far as kind of refinements to his game. He's a very good forechecker. He's always been pretty decent on both ends of the ice, which has been, great to see. But he's starting to finally get that, put things together on the offensive side and be able to become a really strong finisher, kind of one of those guys who the shots he's taking, should have got him around 25, 28 goals, but he's got such a strong, got that ability to just finish the shot and get it in the net that, he finally had that pay off this season. And I think that potential's always been there. So again, 27 years old, that aging curve, for forwards, it starts to drop off around that time. And so it'll be interesting to see, but I think if you get this, you get Filip Forsberg, for another 30 or more goals next season, I think that's considered a success because it shouldn't be all on him, but he's got that ability to change a game, him and Matt Duchene.
I don't want to kind of take over the hosting here, but purely as a fan, I like your analysis so far, Bryan. What and I got I'm time limited here, so I apologize. I got to go, but I want to know what you say about this. This year, you get career years out of Forsberg, out of Duchene, out of Yossi. All of these dudes, what didn't work? Like, what was it? This is what I've tried to diagnose this entire season where I was watching, where I was like, you got all of this, like an entire core set of dudes who are some of the best guys in the entire NHL playing near the peak of their ability, and we squeak it into the playoffs and getting swept in the first round. What was it?
Okay, yeah. In the interest of your time, I'll kind of go through it real quick. They had the top end players. It worked out really great for them, like Forsberg, like you said. But their second line, they had Luke Cunnin for all 82 games, and they just traded him away, and he was, just very, very disappointing. But there was that lack of depth scoring. Their second most effective line was that line of Tanner Jeannot and Matthew Olivier and Colton Sissons, which is great. You get a guy like Tanner Jeannot who comes in as a rookie and is scoring really well. But you don't want your third checking line that's mostly rookies or, 3-year veterans. That shouldn't be your second best producing line. And you see the team, they had their best power play performance all season in franchise history, but still finished 8th. The penalty kill wasn't bad. And then losing UC Saros towards the end. UC Saros, as is tradition in Nashville, goaltending kind of, keeps up the career of coaches and GMs here in Nashville, because if UC Saros or a Pecorino can steal a game, and you win 1-0, you're fine with that because you didn't need your forwards to score 4 times. Well, when you're in a division with someone like Colorado, you can't do that. You got to score a lot. And that's something that the Preds just weren't able to do because they're such a hard, heavy team. And it didn't rely a lot on rushes and breakouts. And so that's kind of hurt them in the end because teams started to figure out what they did, similar to kind of what we saw towards the end of Laviolette's tenure.
Well,
there you go. Are you
excellent.
Good? Do you feel better, Charlie?
I do. That's very informative. I just with the whole thing, I scream into the void about because I do. The way that you're talking about the Predators, that's the way that I have to cover Tennessee. I do a Tennessee game day show. I do a Tennessee podcast. I do all this stuff, follow it like a hawk, know the ins and outs of all of it. And then I can give my ridiculous hot takes with that. But I just feel like with the Predators sometimes when I just go, like at the end of the season, I just – like I see a lot with my radio show. I'll give some – radio show. It's a podcast I do. Sorry, I used to do radio.
Mhm.
Anyway, I used to be a star back in the good old days. But I just see, I'll give an opinion that is very informed in my personal opinion, and then people who I think are much more casual fans see it and they go, no, that's not, and we kind of read it and go, okay, I get why you feel that way. I feel like a lot of the times with the Predators, I am that guy. I am the fan that is like, I don't know all those analytics where you break down. You're absolutely right. Like the young talent and all that. And I actually really like the young talent that the Predators have. But I feel like with a lot of my stuff, like at the end of the season, I was just like, get this. Of course, also as a Tennessee fan, I'm inclined to fire coaches.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, get these guys out of here. Like, this is over. I've seen it enough time in my life to know when somebody's cooked and this is over. Like, it just was just mediocrity. And but I also feel like I am still someone who has to ask that question, like to someone like you who's extremely informed, and kind of go like, can you explain it to me like I'm a child?
I can give you my hot takes. I mean, I think that the fact that they led the league by so much, and penalties taken this year show that it was a weakness both in the head coaching area and the staff and in the GM, because they are bringing in players and promoting these players that committed a lot of these penalties in the sake of roughness. And so that's frustrating, and you're not going to do well unless you've got the best power play in the NHL. You're not going to make that worth it. Also, they didn't do a very good job in managing the middle of those rosters. David Poile brings in these guys or calls people up from Milwaukee, but these are guys that fit that mold, those big bruiser guys. And it's like, how about we promote some guys who can score goals? That would be fantastic. They're a strong forechecking team, which works for the style that they play. But when you've got a guy like Roman Josi and Matt Duchene and Filip Forsberg, you've got to be more of a fast break transition teams at times, and they just weren't. And so I think a lot of it, is that there's like a style. What's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't quite match up between what Poile provides for John Hines and what Hines, right? And again, I've come around on how, my opinions on John Hines. I think that right now it's as good as they're going to have. I think he's working on the system. It's not been a complete disaster, but with the NHL, it's not like college football, which is rough for me. It's not, you don't get the guy that's up and coming at Jackson State University or something like that out there in West Tennessee. Like, you don't get that, a new coach come up there. It's just the same recycled 32 coaches. You get one guy gets fired, he gets hired somewhere else. Laviolette got fired. Hines had been fired a week earlier, and they had brought him right on. But it's not even just Nashville. It's everybody. You don't see, a lot of people take chances, even on AHL coaches. Milwaukee's Carl Taylor has been an NHL assistant. He's been in Milwaukee. He's been a coach of the year there. They wanted to go with another guy instead of trying to bring someone in unproven. And so I think it's that lack of vision, I guess, with David Poile, is he doesn't know how long he's going to be there or if he plans on staying for a long time. But I don't know that his plan for this team aligns anymore with what this team is. I think the directors or the owners and Poile both, they're living off that run from the Cup. And it's, it's time to move on, and they still have yet to commit to doing a full rebuild or anything like that. And that may keep them in mediocrity for a few years.
That's you said Poile's vision doesn't meet up with what this team is. That's exactly how I feel. That's like so perfectly put. But I got to run, guys. Yeah. I apologize. Thank you. I'll let you give actual analysis now, and I'll just
this was great.
I appreciated it. Yeah, you got me grounded. I appreciate that.
No, but this was great, guys. I apologize. I won't. If we do this again, I will not be time crunched like this.
You're good. You're good. Next week, Charlie Burris, you'll be here.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Bye, Charlie. Yeah. Enjoy the airport.
I'll do my best.
Tell McGee Tyson I said hi.
All right.
See you, man. That was Charlie Burris. Go give him a follow if you've not already done so. Great sports writer for A to Z Sports. Brian Bastin, it's just you and I. And then there were two.
And then there were two. Yep.
First round pick, though. I think we jump into here now. So there is a big steal on this front where a lot of folks, you read all the analysis and everyone was surprised the Preds stumbled into who they stumbled into in the first round. Were you just as surprised?
Yeah, I will tell you that I'm not as up on the scouting, with recruiting in college football or, drafting into the NFL, you get a good chance. You get a lot of chances to watch guys. There's videos everywhere.
Right.
There's not many chances to see a bunch of a 17-year-old kid playing in a Finnish league,
Yeah.
here when you're sitting in Nashville, Tennessee. But, after going through it, yeah, he's a fantastic player. I mean, he's a guy that was evaluated top 10 by a lot of people. The Preds said they had him 7th on the board. Joakim Kemell, he's a guy who played last year in the Finnish Liga. They're pro hockey, and he had 15 goals and 23 points in his 39 pro games, and they did not expect that because the year prior, he had great numbers in the under 18 division, but nobody really expected him to come in and, produce as an 18-year-old. But I think scored 9 goals in his first 15 games and then had 6 goals and 8 points in the World Championships this year. This is a guy who came onto that scene and to play hockey there and, started dominating immediately. He's got an incredibly powerful shot. This is a little bit different than what you'd see from someone like Eeli Tolvanen, where, he's got that big wind up and that laser shot. I mean, the power comes out of his wrist and you don't see much of a wind up or the stick bend. All of a sudden it's rocketing past you. He's a much stronger, he's got a game where he can work the middle a little bit more in there, Tolvanen or somebody like that. I don't want to keep comparing him to Tolvanen, but that's kind of the easiest comparison I've heard from people. But, he can work the middle. He can get in there and drive in to open up lanes and things like that. He's a very good passer as well. Kind of reminds me of the passing ability that Ryan Johansson has, something that's a little bit underrated, I think. But I mean, they were expecting him to drop, go in the top 10, and, the top 10 shook out a little bit odd with some of the guys dropping, but I'm sure that they rushed, to get this guy because he's been fantastic so far, is what we can see. And there's a lot of opportunity for him to grow. But this is a guy that, they've got to the playoffs, which unfortunately meant that they didn't get into the draft lottery. So they're going to pick, 17th. They're just outside the playoffs, and they still managed to get a top 10 talent. And, that's fantastic. And I think that they did a really good job of identifying that, especially since they didn't have a 2nd round pick this year.
Why do you think they didn't tender David?
It's just been one of those that he was a guy that they drafted back in 2017. He played 4 years at Bastin alongside Dante Fabro for part of that. And he was one of those exciting guys that they thought that he was developing right alongside Fabro. He was going to be that Fabro type player. He stayed at Bastin for the 4 years, and then he came to Milwaukee last season for his first pro year, on the 2nd year of his 2-year entry-level deal, and had, I believe, 1 point or 1 goal and like 8 points, I believe, like that. I mean, just really something that 1 goal and 13 points in 50 games. So not what you want to see. Obviously, defenseman, yes, but that's not what you want to see. You think that a guy that, you've had been in the system for 4 years, you've given him a deal, he should show up in Milwaukee, a very good team in the AHL, and just really couldn't stay in the roster or was getting those bottom pair minutes. And so I think it was just one of those where Nashville had to move on from him. They could have given a little bit more time, and they still could be negotiating with him. They didn't tender him. They may have not wanted to, give him as much, as a qualifying offer would give. So, maybe they're negotiating now, to get him back, at league minimum, but it'll be curious to see, because no other team, he's been a trade piece that we've heard rumors about in the past that teams wanted him, as a prospect, but the fact that he hasn't been signed yet could mean that he's working on wanting to stay with Nashville.
I like it. In terms of free agency, though, slow start.
Yeah.
What do you think is ultimately going to happen here in free agency?
It's really, really hard to tell you that. I mean, have had about 5 signings, and I think those first 5 were all AHL guys. Milwaukee fans are ecstatic. I mean, they've got some really great guys. They got a guy who was the former last year's AHL Defender of the Year. They've got some really good players, and they brought in some other guys and re-signed some guys. So that's going to be great. But, we're trying to figure out what's going to happen with the Predators. Luke Cunningham gets traded away. Matthew Olivier gets traded away. You start to see all the free agents that, like David Riddick and stuff like that. They're all signing with other teams, but we're watching guys come off the board. And obviously I didn't think Nashville was going to be a player for a Johnny Gaudreau or somebody like that. He may have been a priority when, if Forsberg deal fell through, but he wasn't going to make a big splash. So I didn't quite expect them to go for a huge fish right now. but I expected a little bit of something. Some of that middle six depth. I think they're good on defense right now, especially with adding Ryan McDonough. I think that was actually a very good add, but they're waiting and names are starting to fly off the board. I mean, now I think the top two free agents that are out there are Nassim Kadri and Patrice Bergeron, which Bergeron, I think there's indications that he's going to stay in Boston. He'd be a fantastic get if they could do it. And Kadri, I've heard Nashville talked about before, as interested in him in the past, but not a lot of talk now. I think there's still a chance he returns to Colorado, but he had such a fantastic year. So there's not as much out there. There are guys that Mason Marchment, I think thought was great and would be an excellent signing. He went to Dallas, and you hate to see that. But there's a couple guys still out there. I think there's Niederreiter, who's been kind of an exciting two-way forward in Carolina, 24 goals, 44 points last season. I think that's exactly the type of guy you want to have on your second line with Ryan Johansson or Mikael Granlund, because of his creativity and his ability to kind of, be a playmaker. They didn't have that on the second line before, so he's still available. Obviously, there's Phil Kessel, who's kind of just the crowd favorite for everybody, just for whether it's his ability or the memes and his love of hot dogs. I'm not sure, but they're both good. And, he'd be that guy who's been there forever. He's been in the league forever. He's, that veteran. He'd be a fun ad, and he can still score. He can still play. This isn't kind of like some of the veterans that Nashville's added in the past, like, your oh gosh, what's his name? I'm trying to think. Wayne Simmons and stuff like that. Like, they were good for what they were, but they weren't going to come in there and change the game. There wasn't a guy that was going to be, first star of the game for 2 or 3 games, every month. I think he has a chance to impact like that. And there's been a lot of talk about Phil Kessel in Nashville. So I'm curious to see if that gets done. I don't think that's the answer to fix a lot of the issues, but hopefully they do something. And of course, you've got guys like Calle Jarnkrok who are back free agents. And, that's me turning my analyst or my writer brain off. I'm like, yeah, I just want Calle Jarnkrok back because I liked him, and then someone's like, well, why? I'm like, is that a good enough answer for you?
Just because
he was a good fit. He wasn't frustrating. I don't think I got mad watching him play hockey. So it's like, yeah, I'll take that.
That's not bad.
Yeah,
that's a good answer. We'll end on this. So they signed a goalie, and this ruffled some feathers, and this seems pretty split on how Preds fans feel about this. Where did you land on this?
Yeah, so like I said, with David Riddick, they obviously they announced pretty much the second the season was over that they weren't planning on bringing him back. So they knew that he was going to be gone, which is fine because he was just a very serviceable backup. You didn't want more than 10 games or 20 games out of him a year. And so, the thought was that after we saw Connor Ingram get called up and have a pretty good performance against the Avalanche in one of those games or a couple of those games in the playoffs, the expectation was that Ingram would be the Saros' full-time backup in Nashville. You would get, Devin Cooley or, we'd have Askarov in Milwaukee, for his first North American, pro hockey experience, be playing that and getting ready because he's not ready for Nashville yet, obviously. And, so that's kind of how everybody thought it was going to shake up. But then they go and sign Kevin Lankinen from Chicago, $1.5 million. And I was very confused because that's a guy that they're not signing him to send him till Milwaukee. I don't think. I could understand maybe if they're wanting to give Ingram some time, let him be the starter in Milwaukee for a while, working with Askarov, and to eventually get Ingram up. But, there's always that chance that they could be using Ingram as trade bait. I said early in the free agency that, especially like Toronto, with how aggressive they were chasing after goaltenders, and they had that deal to get Matt Murray from Ottawa, which I would rather have Ingram at this point than Matt Murray, even though Ingram's fairly unproven, just because we know what Matt Murray is.
Right.
And we've seen flashes from Ingram, what he can do. He's on his last year of his rookie deal, so he's $730,000 right now. So he's a cheap addition for somebody who needs maybe a quality backup. So yeah, that very well could be, and that he might be working on something to get a forward back on that. So rather than going free agency route, getting a player in a trade. But I haven't seen much indication of what that plan is. They haven't talked too much about that, and it threw a wrench in pretty much what everybody expected to happen. So it could very well be that they just have him here. Ingram will get called up. Ingram will see a lot more time as the season progresses, but maybe they don't feel confident enough to give him even that yet, and they want him to have another full year to maybe split time with Askarov in Milwaukee and see what happens after that.
I like it. I like it. Bryan, this has been awesome as we kick things off here on our local Nashville Predators portion of the weekly podcast. So I greatly appreciate you making the time, and thank you again to Charlie for popping on. You know, it's funny too, as we wrap up here, we have the exact same, I have my jacket over it, but we have the exact same gaming chair that we sit in. I'm not these are the most comfortable chairs known to man. Like, I will never not get one of these chairs as my office chair. They're incredible.
Yeah, they're really. I mean, I got a pretty good deal on it. Yeah,
yes,
it's bright blue and it looks like a racing car. But
exactly, I don't care. It's comfortable.
Sometimes I wanna look like a race car driver. You know, that dream isn't dead. So yeah.
I'm right there with you, my friend. I'm right there with you. We can read you on the Forecheck. Anything else you'd like to plug as we wrap up here today?
Oh yeah, you can also see I'm working with Charlie Sonia and Renegades and Puck. We have a show on YouTube. You can find us there. We're expanding out to other social, but we're doing videos every game after the game happens. So usually those go out about an hour after the game is over, and then you have something ready for you to listen to or to watch on the way to work after game days. So make sure you check that out as well.
There you go. Awesome. Very excited to keep doing these with you, man. I think it's going to be a fun off season as we build it up and this fall and everything else. And I think we'll have to catch games and go do that and just really branch out, man. I think this will be fun.
Yes, sir. That'd be great.
Exactly. All right, my friend. Well, I will talk to you next week.
Yeah, that's all right. Thanks for having me on.